Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone, I am really delighted to introduce today's guest, Kelly K. James, formerly Kelly James Enger. Kelly has been writing for a living as an employee and full-time freelancer for more than 20 years. The former attorney is the author of books, including the book that almost got me fired, How I Barely Survived a Year in Corporate America, Writer for Hire, 101 Secrets to Freelance Success, and Six-Figure Freelancing, The Writer's Guide to Making More Money, second edition. She works, writes, plays 8-ball, and attempts to golf from her home outside Chicago, which she shares with 2 teens, a high-energy rescue pup, and a very spoiled fat cat. Please join me in welcoming Kelly K. James. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Tammy. I'm delighted to be here.
I am really happy to have you here. And as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we really love to begin at the beginning and talk a little bit about your formative years and how they may or may not have informed where you are today. So take us back to those early days and tell us a little bit about them.
Sure. Well, I will say as a child, I did love to write. But I was having this conversation with my 14-year-old when I remember being in first grade and we had to write down what we wanted to do when we grew up. And I don't remember everything on the list, but I remember it was 13 or 14 jobs because I didn't want to limit myself to anything. And I know veterinarian was on there. Astronaut was on there. That, astronauts were a big thing. Writer, teacher, actor. I don't think lawyer was on there, but I just had all of these ideas. And what I in high school, I wrote, I knew I liked to write, and I've always been a reader. My favorite thing to do as a child was go to the library and come home with, an entire stack of books because I could read literally all afternoon and all night. And I was that kid who would walk down the street reading a book or lie in bed, with the flashlight reading and get in trouble because although there were things to get in trouble for.
I know, really.
Yeah. But when I went to college, I got into a business program at University of Illinois, which was one of the more competitive programs, but I didn't really think about what I wanted to do. Second day of my sophomore year, I dropped out. In retrospect, I had an anxiety attack. I'd never had one before, and I didn't know what it was. My entire family was out in California for one of my older stepsister's weddings. So I ended up working full-time as a bus person, restaurant hostess, and dishwasher. And if you want your kid to be motivated to go back to college, go into the service industry and wash dishes all night. So I knew I wanted to go back to school. And when I went back the next semester, I changed majors and majored in rhetoric, which is the writing major, not an English lit major, although you take a lot of literature classes, but it was an actual writing major. And had no idea what I would do with that when I got out of school. But that was back in the day where when you got a degree from a good school, you got a job. They're going to hire you. You don't need actual skills.
Yeah.
And my last semester of college, I took a class called Law and Literature. And it was when surrogacy was just starting to become a thing. And I think it was the Baby M case where the surrogate changed her mind after delivering the baby and wanted to keep the baby. And the parents, they were involved in litigation over it. And I remember I said, they signed a contract. They have to go by the contract. And the professor who had come to talk to our class said, well, you'd make a good lawyer for, the so-and-sos. And I was like, oh, lawyer. And then I took the LSAT during finals week, because this is how I do stuff kind of insanely, and did fairly well. And then I applied to Southern Illinois University's law school because it was the cheapest law school in Illinois. So this, as you can tell, there was no actual plan going on here. Got out of law school, got a job with a big firm in downtown St. Louis doing insurance defense law. And then, this is true, first day on the job was Monday, August 12th, 1991. And on Thursday, August 15th, 1991, at 7:38 p.m., because I looked at my watch, I was in Keener West parking garage, and I realized I had made a terrible mistake. I knew this is not what I wanted to do. And I stuck it out for another 5.5 years. I changed jobs 3 times, different types of firms, different size firms. And I say now, but it's like changing seats on the Titanic. You know, I was still a lawyer. I still didn't enjoy the practice. And then I started writing articles about, or excuse me, I started writing short stories about unhappy female lawyers, which, you know, were all fiction, and realized that magazines, I was trying to get published in magazines. At the time, a lot of magazines published fiction. Redbook published a couple short stories. Woman's Day used to have fiction. Mademoiselle, Glamour, Cosmo, they all had fiction. But most of what a magazine publishes are articles. And I thought, well, wait, I should be writing articles. And my first sale was an article called Surviving Your Last 2 Weeks on the Job. And I sold it to Cosmo. I had no journalism background. I had no clips. I had no experience. I had no clue, but I was able to write in a way that their readers would relate to. And since I'd changed jobs 4 times in 5 years, I had great ideas. And then I sold an article to brides on, again, avoiding legal problems as you plan your wedding, because I was planning my wedding and I would ask questions of our potential vendors. And I remember the one said, I asked him how much liability insurance he carried, and he said, you don't need to worry yourself about that. And the little lady was implied. And I said, I'm actually a contract attorney. I get paid to worry about things like this. But I thought most people planning a wedding, and of course, this is before, you know, social media, don't have access to that kind of thing and don't know what questions to ask. So that's the article I wrote. So with those 2 clips, as we call them in journalism, I quit my job as a lawyer and started freelancing full time. That's kind of that's the act 1, I guess.
It sounds almost like a bullet train in some ways. Like,
yeah.
You know, because and I'm gonna rewind the tape a little bit.
Go right ahead.
I'm curious about a couple of junctures there for you. So I think you said it was the second day of your sophomore year. I love the way you can pinpoint almost to a moment when something pivoted for you, and you said you had an anxiety attack. Sounds like it was something that you had not experienced before, but it was a clue to something for you, and so somehow that led you to decide to drop out. There must have been some other circumstances. I'm not trying to pry into anything as much as say, how did you decide to drop out? Because some people will have something like that happen. They go see a doctor and they, you know, maybe they go back to school. Like that was a very cut and dry. It sounds like it was a very cut and dry decision. I don't know if that's the way it really went, but then you worked in a, you know, service role and then went back to school in a quite different major. I'm curious how you made those decisions.
Sure. You know, looking back, I've had anxiety my entire life. I mean, even as a little kid, I think a lot of us who are anxious, I mislabeled my anxiety as energy and drive for about 45 years, and then finally realized this is actually anxiety that's doing this. And I can't pinpoint what happened at the time. I was taking oral contraceptives, which I think were triggering some hormonal shifts, which was great for me. I was 18 at the time. And I remember I had this just sense of, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And then I went to 3 or 4 different offices on campus because there's a whole process of how you drop out. And as a mother now of a son who will be 19, not one adult said, hold on, what's going on? Let's call your parents. Do you have someone to talk to her? And so I was living in my hometown and I went to my parents' house and then did have a full-on anxiety attack. And I turned out fine, but that is something that I know colleges do much better with today in terms of mental health, especially of young adults. It's something we're more aware of. But it wasn't a conscious decision. It was just this, I can't do this. I have to get out of here. I have to quit. I have to quit school. So I will say, as far as the hormonal part goes, I ended up going off the pill, and a lot of those emotional, whatever I was dealing with, a lot of them receded. But the anxiety, I wake up feeling anxious, and I have other ways of managing it. But I think that I was aware that this is, you mentioned a bullet train. This isn't the bullet train I want to be on. I'm not sure which train it is, but I know it isn't this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I applaud you for taking care of yourself and trying to find solutions where it wasn't clear what they were. And I can appreciate too how you can reflect back and look at, I thought I've had anxiety a long time, and I thought it was just energy.
Right.
And how you distinguish between what anxiety is, how that shows up in your life versus, because I get the feeling you have a lot of energy too.
I do.
So how do you distinguish between those two, and how did that, I'm also looking at how you decided to go from a business program to studying rhetoric. Did you, you clearly you were a kid with your head, your nose in books all the time.
Right.
I was surprised actually when you said I studied business. I'm like, really? Because it sounded like you weren't the kid who was looking at business. So,
well, I did. I was always a very smart kid. I skipped a grade when I was in first grade. I went into second. I graduated at the top of my high school class. I got a 31 on my ACT, had straight A's. I was the classic overachiever. And at the time, getting into U of I, the two most competitive programs were business and engineering. And I knew I didn't want to go into engineering. So I was like, well, I'll play in business because that's what you do. I don't remember ever having a discussion with anybody about what do you want to do? What are your goals? Yeah. And I knew that it wasn't a good fit for the person I was. Like I didn't have those business-like dreams, even though I wound up owning my own business, but who knows? But I think that I was unhappy. I didn't want to work in a restaurant doing full-time restaurant work for the rest of my life. Yeah. And I think if I go back, I want to go back in something I want to do. And what I wanted to do was write. And I do remember, I majored in fiction writing. I wanted to be a full-time novelist. Mm-hmm. We all know there aren't that many that make a good living doing that. But that's what spurred me to go back to school. Like I wanted to major in something I wanted to do.
It sounded like, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it sounded like, given, that you experienced some level of trauma at that point when you quit school, but that you also came to a realization that if you were going to go back to school, you really had to do something that was really more aligned with who you really were, rather than just doing what you thought you were supposed to do.
Exactly. And when I ended up leaving the law, it was a similar decision. Yeah, I'm on this path, and what's at the end of the path? Partnership, more money. Okay, I don't care about those things. I don't want a Beamer. I don't want to drive a Mercedes. So, it was just sort of that, oh, well, you'll get a degree in business. You can become, well, I don't want to do that. So I agree. It's, and I think that when we go through, especially in a work situation or career, what you thought, even if you were on a path and you're like, well, this is what I want to do, your life changes, or people around you change, or your goals change, or you think of something you want to do that maybe wasn't available before, or didn't appeal to you before. So you do need to be able to kind of readjust, or maybe completely pivot, to use a business word, but, and do something differently.
Yeah. And because you were and are, very bright, high achieving person, everything you touched, you did well at. It must have made it harder sometimes when you were younger, especially, to decide, well, I look at me, I did so well in the LSAT. I should go to law school now.
Right.
That was a quick turnaround on that.
Well, and also when I got to law school, remember I had watched LA Law, so I knew what my lawyer was going to look like. And I had one suit, and I practiced dramatically unbuttoning it and pointing at people. I thought that's what all there was to it. I'm not. But when I got to law school, there were people who had been dreaming of becoming lawyers their whole lives, and adults who were going back to school after 10 or 20 years. And I was just like, well, I thought the law was complicated enough and complex enough that I wouldn't get bored, because that's one of my big fears. That's what makes me anxious. I don't want to be bored. I don't want to be bored. I like to have stuff going on all the time. So, and I did not, my stepdad was a dentist. I did not want to go into medicine. I actually do have good eye-hand coordination, but I didn't know it at the time. And okay, so medicine's out. Well, what's law? Okay, law, so I just thought it was a smart person's.
Sure.
And I love lawyers. Many of my close friends are lawyers. I work with lawyers, but there are a lot of not that smart people in law school. That's all I'm going to say. So.
No, I can appreciate what you're saying tremendously. It really, it's an interesting, in a way, I was struck by the speed with which you went in that direction. And yet, what you're also describing, though, is the process by which you made those decisions, which is really not that unusual for a lot of people. I think a lot of people in those younger years made certain decisions almost by default in some ways. Like, well, I don't really know what I want. I know I don't want this. I don't want that. So, well, that looks like a good thing to do. So I'll do that. I'm good at it. And it's usually not till later that people really do discover what they really want versus what they can do. And fortunately, you were only a few years out from that, I would say, when you started to experience the things that you were really more passionate about, it sounds like.
Yes. And it's kind of like when you have a differential diagnosis in medicine where, it's like, well, this condition could be all of these different things. And then they start ruling them out. Okay, well, it's not a stroke. It's not this. It's not that. And then you're left with what they think it is, which may or may not be it. Sometimes things are just impossible to diagnose. But I don't know if you remember I'm trying to think of his name. It was called Inside the Actor's Studio was a show on.
Sure.
And he would do the questionnaire at the end with these great questions. What's your favorite swear word? What job would you like to attempt if you weren't doing it now? What job would you not like to attempt? And I was always much better at coming up with all the jobs that this is as a young adult that I didn't want to do. Like, I don't want to be a long distance truck driver. I hate driving. I don't want to sit all day. I would, eat snacks all day long. And I would be bored and stressed.
James Lipton.
I was more eliminating the things I didn't want to do. And then eventually it was like, wait, what do I actually want to do instead of what do I not want to do? And I do think there's a difference.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so what's also remarkable is that there you were practicing law, not enjoying it, and you started writing, and you didn't go for some little local newspaper to submit an article to. You went to Cosmo.
Right.
How did you decide to go to these, more top tier publications?
Yeah, it's funny because the advantage of not having a journalism degree or a J degree was I didn't know anything. I didn't know you can't start at the top. So I didn't have that knowledge. Yeah. I remember there was a publication called Writer's Market that came out once that listed all the magazines.
Yep.
And I decided that I was going to try to write for magazines I read. And I read Cosmo. I read Mademoiselle. I read Glamour, but Cosmo was my favorite. And I used to get at the beginning of the year, they'd have the Cosmo bedside astrologer, and you tear it out, and I would lie on my bed in my house on campus, and with like a pound bag of M&Ms, read Cosmo and eat M&Ms. Those were my days, But I was very familiar with the types of articles that Cosmo ran. Yeah. And I was confident that I could write one of those articles. And I knew nothing. I sent the article in. I didn't know you were supposed to send a query letter. I mean, I was completely ridiculously embryonic in my writing development.
I love that.
I'll say
embryonic. Great words. Yes. So that was your first article that got published.
Correct.
And then the next one, you just mentioned it a moment ago, but
it was how to avoid legal problems as you plan your wedding.
Right.
And I sent that one to brides because, again, now I'm planning a wedding. So I'm reading Brides and Modern Bride and Bridal Guide for the bride. I wrote for all 4 of those publications over the next few years.
Oh, wow. And so at that point, you decided, I think I can really make a go of this. I'm going to leave the practice of law and just keep writing.
Correct. Well, I was living with the man I married, and we were engaged and living together at the time. And I said, I want to quit and I want to write full time. And he was supportive. And he said, basically, if anything will make you not miserable on Sunday nights, because I think that's how you know a job isn't a good fit for you. When you have, the Sunday night malaise that starts in the morning and just gets worse and worse because you're dreading going to work. And I had felt like that for so long. I saved enough to live on. We weren't married yet, but we were sharing expenses. I saved, I think, $4,400. That's it. And then I had a car payment. I had my loans, but he paid the mortgage, and then we split the other expenses. So that I figured I would give myself 6 months to see if I could make a go of it. And it took probably 4 or 5 months before I started getting checks in for the work I was doing, because I underestimated how much time it was going to take to get an assignment, turn it in, get paid. The payment schedule is always longer than you think it's going to be.
Well, and I'm sure, all these years later, you realize that was still a pretty short timeline to start making money as a writer, right?
Right. It was. And again, one of the advantages of being a younger adult without children or other responsibilities is I could afford to lose all my money and then go take a job doing something that wasn't a lawyer and start from scratch. I didn't have to be making a certain amount of money. And my first year of freelancing, I only grossed $17,000. Now, my second year, I think I made 38. And by my third year, I made 44 or 45. And I was, it was going, and of course, this is 25 years ago when that wasn't poverty pay. It would be now. But I did recognize that it takes time to build. I just didn't realize how wide that base was going to have to be. The bigger the pyramid, the bigger the base. And I needed a big base.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it sounds like, that's quite a nice, if you just not looking at the actual numbers themselves, but the way that they increased, you did really well.
I did. And by my fifth year, I hit 6 figures. That's when I was like, oh, well, I can do this. I can, do this and make a decent living doing this, working from home, having a lot of freedom, having a lot of flexibility, which I value. And
what else were you discovering as you were building this as your profession, as your business? Like, it sounds like you also were very creative in terms of just figuring out I don't know if editors were kind of giving you assignments or you were coming up with the ideas, but were you enjoying the writing process itself? Or
Yes, I always did enjoy writing. I am very good at goal setting. So one of the things I did when I started, because again, how am I going to get assignments? Well, I have to send queries to magazines. And so my goal was to send a new query to a new market every day. Okay. So that's, 5 a week. That if you're doing this full time, that's not that aggressive. But the biggest thing I did, and I've talked about this many times when I've taught writing workshops, is I had the 24-hour rule. And the 24-hour rule meant that when I got a rejection, and this is back when they came in the mail, they came in your self-addressed stamped envelope, and you'd open it up and there'd be a little slip of paper photocopy that said, we can't use this, best of luck to you, go away, whatever it said. But 2 things would happen. Number one, I would find another market for that query. So if I pitched how to get along with your future in-laws to brides and they didn't want it, I sent it to Modern Bride or the next one on the list. But number 2, and this is really important, I would send a new query to the magazine that rejected me. And I always started off by saying, thank you for your response to my pitch about not rejection. To my pitch about women in weightlifting. Well, I'm sorry you can't use it at this time. I have another idea for you to consider. And then I would write the new query. And that is how I got in the door with Women's Day, Family Circle, Fit, Self, Shape, Fitness, because often your first idea, your first query doesn't get you the assignment. Right. But I was like, oh, and I say it's like when you go shopping, you're at the Gap and you try on a pair of pants, the salesperson doesn't say, and you don't like the pants. She doesn't say, okay, bye. She's like, how about these pants? How about these flat fronts? How about these capris? And so I'm like, I'm going to keep bringing them pants until they tell me, to get out of the store. And I did have a few markets. I never got in the door with glamour. Still to this day, it bugs me. But then sometimes I was like, okay, this market is just, I couldn't get into Runner's World for years. And I was like, forget it. I don't want to write for them. Then one day I pitched him again, got an assignment. So by doing that, the number one, instead of, I got a rejection, I turned a rejection into 2 opportunities. And it kept me really focused on what I could control, which was sending out queries and sending out ideas. So some days, when I got 7 rejections on one day and that happened, that meant that 14 new queries had to go out the next day. And I did that.
Wow.
It only happened a couple times, but what happened was as the work started coming in, I could back off the marketing a little bit, because what happens when you're a freelancer, if you do a good job, you do get editors coming to you.
Yeah.
Or and send you a paragraph and the editor says, sure, we'd love it. I'm not trying to build a relationship with you from scratch, which is the time consuming part.
Right. How long would you say it took you before you started hearing from editors, bringing ideas to you or asking you to create?
Yeah, it was about 1.5 years when I could feel that shift happen, where I was no longer just, kind of looking in the window, like, hi, I got this other idea, where I'm starting to get an identity as, oh, she does really great, straightforward health, or she's a good fitness reporter. And I also, not intentionally, but over that 1.5 years, I started specializing in health, fitness, nutrition, and wellness, and bridal, because I did a lot of bridal stuff. But I fell into the specialties that I was already interested in and wrote about. I'd been a vegetarian at the time for 10 years. I'd been a runner for 10 years. I was always pretty passionate about women's health issues. I used to do a lot of contraception stories, healthy women stories, like, don't be afraid to talk to your doctor, that kind of. So topics that I had an opinion about, I ended up writing about. I mean, I must have done probably 12 or 15 stories on contraception alone. And I like doing that kind of reporting.
Yeah. Yeah. So once that kind of turned that corner, you probably still were doing queries, but the balance of things really shifted.
Correct. It was more, I had some contributing editor relationships where you have a regular, sometimes a contract, sometimes it's just a relationship, but I knew that I was going to be, doing a story every issue for this magazine. And that was about the time I segued into books, because I had always wanted to write books, but I didn't think I could write a book. And then one day I realized that a book is actually a collection of long articles.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter is, it's a long article. I was like, oh, wait, I can write a long article. But until, there's that saying, when the student is ready, the master will appear. Until my brain made that transition, I really didn't think I could write a book. And then I wrote one, and for an advance of $2,500. And it interviewed 56 people for it, because I had no confidence in myself. I was like, well, I don't know. I'll ask all these other writers. But doing that process made me realize I could write a book. So then I wrote and then I wrote and sold a couple novels in the meantime. And then eventually co-authored a book that's still out, that still sells pretty well, and then got into ghostwriting. So kind of
So take us there. Take us on that part of your journey.
Yeah, well, the first book I wrote was called Ready, Aim, Specialize, How to Create a Writing Specialty and Make More Money. I'm always tying in making more money. People think you can't make a good living as a writer, a freelancer, and that's not true. And then I wrote, I think, 6-Figure Freelancing after that, and I had a couple other titles, but I wanted to get into bigger books. So at that time, I think my biggest advance had been $15,000, which at the time wasn't terrible, but I can't live on that. So I would be writing a book and then also writing articles as well. And ideally kind of double dipping, like writing articles about writing and then writing a book about writing and then speaking about writing, like kind of cross-pollinating everything. But I reached out to a woman, a nutritionist, a dietitian in New York, because I was looking for a co-author for this idea I had on the taste bud diet, but I can't write it because I'm not an expert.
Right.
And the person I reached out to, Ellie Krieger, had a book proposal that she was looking for a writer for, and it just aligned. And the funny thing is, Ellie didn't know me from Adam, and she talked to a friend of hers. Now I'm drawing a blank. It's Jane. She used to be on the Today Show all the time. She's also a nutrition. Oh no, Joy Bauer, I think.
Oh, Joy Bauer, huh?
Is that right? Okay, so she either Today or Good Morning America, but I used to interview Joy Bauer before she was Joy.
She was on the Today Show, yeah.
Okay, so had interviewed her for, articles for Women's Day or Family Circle or whatever. Well, she and Ellie know each other.
Huh?
And when Ellie reached out to her and said, have you heard of this Kelly James Enger? Joy Bauer said, oh my gosh, Kelly's great. She always calls when she says she's going to. She lets me know when I'm quoted, and she always sends me a thank you note.
Wow.
That got me that book project. And that is part of my, you know what I mean? Like that. So it's one of those, I didn't expect it, but once I had done the book with Ellie, I love collaborating on books.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I had a collaborative book credit plus 4 books I'd published, it was relatively easy for me to start ghostwriting.
So what made you decide that you wanted to do ghostwriting?
That is an easy question to answer because I just had a book come out last week, and I can tell you the time-consuming part of writing a book is not writing the book. It's selling the book and marketing the book.
Yes.
So when I ghostwrite a book, let's say I'm going to get anywhere from 25 to 50,000 to write the book.
Right.
And then when the book's done, I'm done. I'm on to the next book. I don't have to invest the next 6, 12 months, probably more, going around promoting the book, doing writers' conferences, by that point, my son had been born, and I used to do a lot of writers' conferences and travel a lot, and I didn't want to travel anymore. I didn't,
Right.
I've got an adorable baby at home. Why would I want to go to a writers' conference when I can hang out with my baby and take him to the zoo? So I realized that if I want to make not as much money, I'm not just motivated, but if I want to work efficiently, because I don't want to work 8-hour days. If I want to work efficiently, I'd rather write someone else's book and make more per hour in doing that and let go of the ego part of it. And I do really enjoy that collaborative process.
Yes.
When you put 2 smart people together, I said this with my boss when I interviewed. I was like, I really think that 2 + 2 can equal 11. And he said, your math really sucks. Like it does, but you know what I mean? It's like you up each other's game. And I really enjoy that. Yeah. And there are drawbacks to it also.
Oh, I'm sure. I know other ghostwriters, and the collaborative process isn't always that collaborative. So
exactly. I got very good at winnowing out the clients I wanted to work for. But that process takes about 10 years, and you're going to learn that you're going to have some challenging clients before that happens.
Sure. But I'm also intrigued by the fact you've mentioned this here and there a little bit, that you've taught workshops, classes, you've done some speaking. So what has compelled you to also then of course you've written books about writing. So clearly you've wanted to share what you know and what you've learned along the way with other writers. But in terms of, getting out there and speaking and things like that, what drew you to that form of expression?
Yeah, I think the first time I taught a writing class, it was at Joliet Junior College. And this was maybe when I only had 2 or 3 years of experience under my belt. Oh. And I reached out and said, I want to teach this class because I don't know of any, I think I taught magazine writing. I wanted to share what I had learned from reading books and then from, doing it myself. And then I've taught at other North Central College in Naperville, College of DuPage. And then I started doing a lot of workshops at libraries and writers' conferences. And it's funny because over the last few years, since I went in-house, I let all that go. And over the last month or so, I've realized I want to pick it up again. So it starts with reaching out to libraries where I presented before and, hey, I've got these writing programs, and being thoughtful about what I want to present. I had segued into like some health and wellness topics like time management, stress management, healthy habits. But it's not, I'm realizing I had walked away from the platform I'd created, that I'm the six-figure freelancer, the successful freelancer. When I went in-house, I'm like, I'm not a freelancer anymore. I'm like, well, no, wait. Still am a part-time freelancer, and all of these lessons I've learned, actually, most of them apply in the workforce too, as an employee, as versus an independent contractor. And I love helping people. That I love, I love it when I have a student who gets their first assignment, or, hey, I've got a question. I can't get a hold of the source. What would you do? And I want to get back to that. And it's not a coincidence that one kid is in college and one's going into high school. I have some mental time and some emotional energy I can put into that again.
And you said going in-house. Can you tell us what that is?
Well, there are many great things about ghostwriting. One of the drawbacks when you're ghostwriting books is that the publishing process can be long. So I would work with the client on a proposal, send it to the author's agent. The agent sits on it 2, 3, 4 weeks, comes back with edits. Okay, make those edits. Agent sits on it for another 2 or 3 weeks. During those weeks, number one, I'm not making any money. Number two, I don't have any work. Remember the anxiety part of it? Now I'm anxious. Now I'm looking at, what do I have in my savings account? Should I try to get a different book project? Or you put 6, 8 months into a proposal and then it doesn't sell. Now you don't have it's like auditioning for a role that you don't get. You're like, oh, I thought I was going to star in this feature. I didn't even get, I didn't even get a walk-on role.
Right.
So I had, about a year before, I had gotten divorced, and health insurance was becoming more and more an issue for me. And I had applied for several full-time jobs, like Home Depot, like just to get health insurance. And I was like, I don't want to work at Home Depot. I applied for a job in the painting department. And my sister was like, you're the worst painter I've ever seen. I'm like, paint? I have to sell paint, Thank God I didn't get that job. But anyway, I saw there was a small digital marketing company in my town, like 3.5 miles away. And I applied for the job. I write about this in the book, seriously on a whim. I was like, what the hell, I'll apply. Because I had done that in the past and freelanced several times for Pampered Chef, which is based about half an hour from my house. And because sometimes companies need a writer to come in and do freelance work.
Sure.
So I thought, well, maybe I'll, just go, I can freelance or whatever. And when I found out about the job, I was like, ooh, this might be kind of a fun experiment. Maybe I think I'll try it. And then when I got the job offer that same day, I went to lunch with a friend of mine, and I was like, well, if I don't like it, I'll quit. Chris says, that's a great attitude. He said, if you're going to take it with the intention of, doing it for 6 months or a year. Don't go in there with, if I don't like it, I'll quit. And he was right. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it for a year. And I also knew I was going to write a book about it, because that's what I was like, oh, this is going to be a really fun project. Like that was what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. So tell us more about that, how the book came about, and or I'm guessing the book turned out to be different than what you thought it was going to be.
It did turn out to be different, but this would be like, why don't you write a book about what it's like to be a parent? Now write a book while you're parenting. Those books will be wildly different.
Yes, true.
One will be much more optimistic, just saying, and one will be a reality.
Yeah.
What I did was, once I accepted the job, I started taking notes about all this anxiety I was having. Like, oh my God, I'm going to be working with 20 somethings. What if nobody asks me out to lunch? Or what if they call me, granny? Or what if people are mean to me? And it was all this anxiety because I hadn't been in corporate America for 22 years. And when you're a freelance writer and you're kind of kooky, that's not a bad thing. I didn't know if kooky would really work in corporate America.
Was it a corporate type of organization, though?
Well, it's a small company. It's the open floor plan with all the cube farms and that kind of thing. But corporate America is still corporate America. It's not working for yourself. You got to show up. You got to sit at your desk. So that freedom is gone.
Yeah.
But I took notes for 13 months. And then every Friday, I would drive home, and there's this lovely little restaurant here in Downers called Cadence that has this beautiful bar, and it's upscale. And one of my friends used to work there, and I would go and sit at the bar and have a glass of wine and write up all my notes from the week. So most of my notes were written sitting at that bar, and I need to go over there and figure out something to do to promote this book there. I just thought of that. But so then I took a month or two off, and then spent maybe a year actually writing the book. And then spent another year or two trying to get an agent, and then trying to get a publisher for it. And the bottom line is, selling memoir is really, really hard. I mean, unless you have a really, really crazy story, and I'm just a middle-aged white woman who wants to talk about what I don't like about corporate America. And so I ended up going with a very small publisher, but I really wanted this book to see the light of day, and I'm glad I did.
So tell us a little bit more about how you envisioned it versus how it turned out.
I really didn't know what it was going to look like, because I was so completely out of touch with what going to a 9-to-5 job every day means.
Yeah.
I've been 22 years.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be ping pong tables and pinball and people like throwing Nerf balls around the office and everybody joking. And it wasn't like that at all.
Yeah.
The sales guys all talked a lot. The SEO guys talked. The rest of the office, I would say 2/3 of people had giant headphones on. Everyone's just on their computers, just very little interaction. And it was just, and this is just this one workplace. I can't speak for all corporate America.
Right.
For me, who is naturally going to be like, hi, haven't met you. My name's Kelly. Oh, how long have you been here? And people were just kind of like, someone's talking to me. And a week or two in, I realized I'm too friendly for everyone here. But I continued being friendly because that's just my nature.
Right.
And just, I had a lot of great ideas when I first started. And I wouldn't do this now, but I was like, hey, I got a great idea. Why don't we do it like this? That was like when I'd been there a week. I'm not even joking. So don't do that when you start a job. I've learned that, listen, absorb, learn, maybe don't offer your opinion your 5th day on the job about doing this wrong. And here's a better way to do it. So yeah, it was an interesting, I'm glad I did it. I'm very glad I did it, but it was, I will say I am a loud talker. It was not what I expected, but I'm glad I had the experience.
Yeah, good. Well, and you also had an initial, let's say, ulterior motive. You needed health insurance, right?
I did. Health insurance. I'm not kidding. Health insurance was a huge driver for me. Yes.
Yeah. So the book came out a couple of days ago. Is that right?
The official pub date was June 15th. Correct.
Okay, June 15th. And I'm going to say the name of the book again, even though we'll have this all in the show notes. The book that almost got me fired, How I Barely Survived a Year in Corporate America.
Correct.
I find that very compelling.
Well, I wanted to call it The Book That Got Me Fired, but I didn't actually want to get fired. So,
okay.
The Book That Got Me Fired is a better title. Agree?
But you didn't get fired.
Right. So you have to dance with who brung you. So I'm like, it should have been The Book That Should Have Gotten Me Fired, but that's not as good of a title. No, seriously, don't you agree, Tammy? Isn't
Yeah.
almost got me fired is a better title than being correct with my English.
But it's eye-catching for sure.
Yeah,
So now you are promoting the book, which is, of course, the fun part of writing a book. I can say that from my own experience as well. And you can promote a book forever and ever, for sure. And tell us, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know about what else you're up to these days, or what they can learn from your story or your I know there's a lot they can learn from your experience, but I'm curious what else you're up to. It's like, what else are you up to these days? Well, I am launching a book right now. Isn't that enough?
Let me speak to other authors or would-be authors. what I'm doing and enjoying most of it is I'm doing a lot of boots on the ground marketing. And
Sure.
by that, I mean, I have little bookmarks that have the title of the book and a quote from Library Journal. I got a good review in Library Journal.
Oh, nice.
QR code to order it on Amazon. And I carry at least one of these with me everywhere I go. And I am an extrovert, so that helps. But I will chat people up and try to sell them the book. And what I say first is, are you a reader? Yes, I am. What do you like to read? And then I'm like, well, I actually just wrote a book, because a lot of my friends are book authors. So it is a big deal, but amongst us, it's like, it's you know what I mean? Like, a lot of my friends have authored books.
Yeah.
But to people who aren't authors, it's a big deal. And
Yeah.
I have sold books to people who I play pool with. I have sold books to my neighbors. I have sold books at the wine bar where I go to, and I'm going to have a chick event there a week from Saturday. So I'm really leaning into it. And it's only been a week. And honestly, yesterday I was like, oh my God, how many more days do I have to do this? So it's like, oh, years. Okay. But what I'm doing is promising that I'll do 3 to 5 things every day to promote the book. And that could be a blog post. It could be connecting with somebody on LinkedIn. It could just be it could be handing a bookmark to one of I introduce myself to some neighbors who always walk by with their dog.
Nice.
By doing that, you understand, as an author, it doesn't make it quite so overwhelming,
Right.
because literally I hired a publicist. I'm spending money on that. I'm spending money on some other things. Now I'm to the point where I can't spend any more money on this book.
Right.
We're going to promote with less expensive ways.
Well, like being on a podcast is a good.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, and your time is worth something, and we appreciate that. So Kelly, if people want to find out more about you and your work and everything that you're doing, because I know you really do, you give a lot too to people in terms of sharing your experiences as a writer and as a freelancer. What's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, my website is kellykjames.net, just like it sounds. And there's actually a page for the book on there.
Right.
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Facebook as well under Kelly K. James.
Right.
And that's a great place. I have an Instagram account. I think it's author_Kelly K. James. That's something I'm getting up and running now. I'm way more active on LinkedIn and Facebook.
Right. Well, we will have all of that in the show notes for sure,
Awesome.
so
Thank
that
you.
people can find you in all the places they like to find people. And wrapping up, I'm just going to ask you one more question. So you've made a number of significant transitions throughout your career. And I'm wondering if you have a key piece of advice you might give to someone else who's listening, who's considering what's next for themselves.
Sure. I actually want to give 2.
Sure.
First is, it's okay to make envy a driver for you. I just wrote a fun article on, when you're envious of someone, what do you envy? If somebody has a job, or someone's doing something where you're like, man, I wish I was doing that. Look at that more deeply and say, okay, what is it about that? Why am I envious?
Love that.
They, published a book, or she went to, Spain for 3 weeks, or whatever it is, or she gets to work from home all the time. But envy can really be a powerful motivator, but people don't want to admit that they're envious, and everybody envies something.
Right.
And the second one, really, as I was thinking about what we were going to talk about today, don't be afraid to try something different.
Mhm.
Most of us have mortgages. Many of us have kids. We have to buy groceries and, save for college, whatever. But if I had been afraid to, take 6 months to see if I could get a writing career going, I wouldn't be where I am now. And if I wouldn't have been willing to go in-house, which was a big deal for me, and give up my freelance identity and experiment with that, I wouldn't be where I am now, where I still work in corporate America. And notice I didn't say but, and I have a lot more freedom and flexibility in this position. I get to use my legal background. I get to use my journalism background. I get to use my ghostwriting background. It's a really good fit for me, and not a job that I would have considered 2 years ago.
So do we know that's a different job then than the one?
Correct. I left the company that I wrote about, the so-called digital edge, to go to a big company called Dometic. And then I got riffed from Dometic 13 months in. and interviewed for the position I have now. I'm the content writer for Miles Mediation and Arbitration, which is a mediation and arbitration firm based in Atlanta. We have, I think, 7 or 8 offices in Atlanta. We acquired a company in St. Louis where our plan is to go national. And so I work from my living room couch. I go to Atlanta a couple times a year. I have really good relationships with the people I work with. I really enjoy working with our neutrals who are all former attorneys. So, we can speak the same language.
Yeah.
And I get to do a lot of fun stuff. I really like it.
Well, that's great. That's great. Well, thanks for sharing that piece too, because I don't think I knew that you were currently employed, but I can understand why that would continue to be important for you, being that you are still raising those 2 kids.
Well, can I add one more thing, Tammy?
Absolutely.
Well, get rid of black and white thinking, because when in-house, I was like, well, I'm not a freelancer anymore. Well, I wasn't a full-time freelancer, but I was still freelancing on the side. I say my heart still beats with a freelance rhythm. That is just the way I'm wired.
Yeah.
And even today, I still freelance. So I'm doing a fun article now, what to do when you make a mistake at work, how to recover.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
So I get to write about topics. I did a story on, I wanted to get eyelash extensions. So I did a story on what to expect when you get eyelash extensions. I will write about anything. So eventually one day I want to retire from my day job and just go back to freelancing, but that's keeping your hand in is a way to do that. And so instead of saying, well, if I do this, I can't do this. Well, maybe you can, you just need to get rid of the black or white thinking.
Thank you for adding that in, because that is something that I find that when people are scared or anxious of whatever level of anxiety they're experiencing, they tend to go to that black and white thinking. And so when you're, when you're able to be more reflective or thoughtful about the choices you're making, then you can sort of put it in front of you and say, wait a minute, it's not just black and white. There are many, I hate to use the expression, there are shades of gray, only because of that came in. But there are many other variations and other options and choices of what's possible. So thank you for adding that in. And
of course. Yeah.
And the fact that you can work in a job and still have the other things you love doing as well. And I'm just glad to see that you're happy.
Yeah, I am. I am very happy, actually.
It's great. Kelly, thank you so much for being here today. This has really been wonderful. I've learned a lot, and I'm really excited about your book, the book that almost got me fired, How I Barely Survived a Year in Corporate America. Please, everybody, get it. You'll enjoy a good read. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Tammy.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of my interview with Kelly K. James. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 256. And while you're there, you can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. Also, please help me to inspire more people to grow their careers by clicking on the Apple Podcasts button and leaving an honest rating and brief review of this podcast. It really helps attract attention to the podcast. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. You can also help sustain this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, your support is appreciated. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.